Hey, I'm Tripp Babbitt. In this, the third video of a four-part series, Dr. Frony Ward and I will discuss other applications of data like we use for podcast downloads. And just kind of to wrap up this chart, what else could this help us with by charting data in this way? If not just for a podcast, but
Yeah.
also for website downloads or restaurant sales or
Yeah.
restaurant expenses or any other types of data. What would this tell us?
All right. Well, let me actually answer propose one other kind of little thing before we go on to answering that question. Here, when you want to look at the behavior of something that you're doing, and if you've got a website and you want traffic on it, you want
Mm-hmm.
to look at that behavior over time, knowing that sometimes it's going to be noisy, bouncing around, but you need enough data without 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 changing it all the time. You need enough data to understand the series itself, what it averages, what its day-to-day variability is through the moving ranges, so that you can see things like the patterns we saw. The very dominant pattern of days of the week are different.
Okay.
And with that, we could go look at each day of the week and actually characterize each day and see the differences and see how each day of the week behaved. And we saw that most of them behaved predictably within their own limits. Thursday had a point outside the limit because of a cause that we knew about,
Mm-hmm.
changing the server. And Saturday, its last point, was outside the limit on the high side, which in some sense, if you're looking for more traffic, is a good news thing. But we don't know for sure why that one happened.
Right.
Now, how you get messages from your data so that you can act on them and help make your the process of setting up your podcast download situation, how you can improve that, how you study this. There's actually still a good bit of noise in this data. And the next question that I would have is, what happens? Now, this is an interesting thing. Let's see if I can say it so that I'm not jumping too far afield. The original data series had a cycle that showed us days of the week were a phenomenon we ought to look at.
Mm-hmm.
We've now looked at the days of the week and we have now seen that they are not all the same.
Right.
There are some differences. The next thing is just looking at each day of the week by itself will not allow us to see if there's some underlying change in the process that might be driving the process up or down, but isn't a day of the week phenomenon. Not all reasons for a process to behave the way they do is because of a seasonal pattern or cycle. So, looking ahead, we've done the first analysis and learned a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of stuff is going to be helpful moving forward to figure out how you want to run the podcast and the downloads. But there's still messages to be learned in these data. And that particular analysis is a little bit trickier than what we've got right here, a little bit more involved. And we will put that off.
Okay.
Now let's look at or applying this kind of technique to restaurants or to the kiosk in the mall or to anything where you're looking at a count of something, or particularly looking at a count of something where you're looking at traffic coming through. And you can use this series. The way I approach it is, let's look at each one of these. Let's look at the series originally as it appears, then see if there are any messages that pop out. If there are, explore those, look at them individually, and then continue to investigate through techniques that we'll add on a little bit later how you might understand what's happening and how you might improve. I've got one little anecdote from a restaurant, because my daughter was running a restaurant. And one of the things that she ran into was, because that restaurant was close by the football stadium in Knoxville, Tennessee, where the University of Tennessee played, and also close by that. Whenever there was a home football game or a home basketball game, her restaurant was slammed. And they would inevitably run out of ice in the bar and in the restaurant, because the whole place needed ice. You needed ice for the food, for fish, for the drinks, etc. They would run out of ice. So the proposal was, we've got to buy a new ice machine. And when I talked to her about it, I asked her, I said, how many days of the year do you run out of ice? And she said, probably, maybe 15, 16 days of the year. Okay. So do you need a new ice machine for the rest of the time? Well, no. I said, okay. How could you measure about how much ice you use every day, just for kicks, within about 5 pounds? She said, sure, I could do that. I said, and if you put that on a running record, you would see how much ice you typically use. She said, yeah, I could do that. I said, I could find some limits and we could see how much ice your restaurant actually uses. And then we could look at what happens when there is a home football or basketball game and see how much ice you guys actually use then. And then you can make an economic decision about your restaurant. You can decide, oh, well, our ice usage is this amount within these limits every day of the year, except for the ones where we have these home football games, these big events, or home basketball games. And it's going to be cheaper for us to go out and buy ice on those days than it is for us to purchase an additional ice machine. So this kind of investigation of data from restaurants or data from any kind of business can help you make a really good economic decision.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, this was a good start into practical use of data other than economic data on a daily basis then. And so our next one will be looking at kind of, I don't know, we'll say part 2, but it will be a deeper dive into these data and how we might be able to see other things from the same set of data.
Good.
This concludes the third of 4 videos. In the upcoming video, we'll take a deeper look through a microscope and finding additional signals through a new method.